but I think that those are the kind of guys you'd be looking for in the perspective of Pittsburgh. And then maybe Pittsburgh can take like a Garland back, but very unlikely. Josh in the chat says, what's a reasonable deal for Hanifin? So let's scroll down here, and Hanifin, top player, will be traded. Noah Hanifin. I think that's a very likely scenario. You know what? Ryan Leslie, there's a couple sources out there that have suggested that maybe the door isn't completely shut on Hanifin re-signing with the Calgary Flames. But I think when you look at the info that's been provided to us, you look at some of the top insiders in the game, including Elliot Freeman, Frank Cervelli, who have discussed Hanifin wanting to go to a team like the Tampa Bay Lightning or wanting to go home to the Boston Bruins. I think those are the two teams right now for Noah Hanifin. And I think if individually, if you're looking at Tampa, you're looking at maybe like a prospect like Isaac Howard and a first-round pick. If you're looking at Boston, you're looking at a prospect like Fabian Lysell and a first-round pick. And then in terms of contracts going back the other way, maybe if it's Tampa, maybe Calgary would like a player like Nick Paul or Tanner Jeannot to make the salary work and then maybe retain 50%. Or if it's Boston, maybe Jake DeBrusk. His dad's out west. Maybe he joins them out west and heads to the Calgary Flames or Edmonton Oilers. So DeBrusk could be the interesting one that goes back the other way in a Hanifin trade. But yeah, I think that's the reasonable deal for Hanifin. First round pick, prospect, roster player that maybe needs a change of scenery. And then Noah Hanifin to the Boston Bruins, Tampa Bay Lightning, or another contending team. So I think that's a good way to segue into starting to look at some of the top players that will be traded or depth that will be traded. And coach says Canucks are not finished yet and need another solid D-man. And I do agree. And on that conversation, we can go a couple different directions. But I have suggested this rumor in the past. And I don't know if Dumba's considered depth or considered a top player. I wouldn't say at this point in his career he's considered a top player. So we'll put him in the depth. Will be traded. I think Dumba will be traded. I think the Canucks could look at a guy like Dumba, just in terms of the right shot aspect. But I think it also looks at the scenario where is Tyler Myers going to re-sign with the Vancouver Canucks? I think if they don't see that as a path to re-sign Tyler Myers, and I've never been a fan of Tyler Myers outside of his size, which is quite visible. I think Dumba could be the replacement there and maybe be willing to re-sign with Vancouver. So I think the fact that the Canucks have brought in a couple defensive guys like an Ian Cole, Carson Soucy, I think those guys could probably complement Dumba pretty well. And then you could just run with the top pair of Quinn Hughes and Philip Hronik. Noah Juulsen's also been a nice story in Vancouver, so it's not as desperate anymore for a right shot. But for some reason, I feel like Vancouver is going to go for a forward over a defenseman. I just think once you get Soucy, Cole, all the guys healthy, you have 4 or 5 guys that can fill a top 4 role. And then it just comes down to Nikita Zadorov being like your 6th defenseman if you were to move Tyler Myers, which I don't think Vancouver is. So that leaves a bottom pair potentially of Zadorov and Myers when everyone's healthy. Sure, the Canucks might have a second pair with 2 left shot, but I think you want to be careful with guys like Myers and Zadorov, who are high-risk players, especially in the playoffs. So it'd be interesting, and I do agree from the chat that if they were to target a guy like Dumba, Tyler Myers could be on the way out. Let's look at some more examples here of the more realistic targets. So Tarasenko right here. We've actually got two Tarasenkos listed here, but we'll do this one. I think Tarasenko can be considered a top player just for the argument's sake. And I think the top potential destinations for Tarasenko probably include a team like the Florida Panthers, the Edmonton Oilers. I think the sticking point here is going to be retention. I think if Ottawa retains 50% on Tarasenko, he could get a first-round pick. And that's where I think the separation from top player will be traded to depth player will be traded. If you're considered a top player, at least in negotiations leading into the deadline, I think it's fair to say that you're going to get a first-round pick plus. So I think that's fair to put Dumba there at the depth and put Tarasenko and Hanifin there at the top. Let's keep going with some more guys that are in rumors. Alex Wenberg, depth, will be traded. While you're rewatching this, if you're watching on the replay, there's a possibility that Wenberg could already be dealt. I think just based on the fact that he was held out for trade-related reasons, I think Wenberg is a good candidate to be traded before Friday's deadline. Let's go next up, and let's go with the goalie. Jacob Markstrom, top player, will be traded. Another guy on the Calgary Flames. I just have this feeling he's going to be traded. I mean, there's a chance he should go lower in the chart here, but I think after his comments, his public comments against his general manager, Craig Conroy, yes, he didn't name Conroy by name, but when you're saying up top, who else are you talking about? Because if you're Jacob Markstrom, you're not directly dealing with ownership. So you're probably dealing with president/general manager on a basis for a trade, and Markstrom was not happy one bit. I mean, he got basically told that there was a trade in the works for the New Jersey Devils, and that completely got squashed. So I think after that, Markstrom's clearly frustrated, and I think he should get traded, and that's why I'm going to put top player will be traded, Jacob Markstrom, and I think potentially he gets close to a first-round pick or a second, and the equivalent of whatever a package would be for a first replacement. So let's keep it going. Connor Timmins, I'm going to go maybe. More of a depth guy at this point for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Timothy Liljegren's also here, and I'll go maybe. I think between Liljegren and Timmins, side by side here, I think there's a chance that they get dealt, but I think there's a good chance that one of them gets dealt. So that's where I'm at with maybe, because I don't think the Toronto Maple Leafs are in a hurry to trade any defenseman away. But in terms of upgrading, they really need a guy in the top four. They just acquired Ilya Lyubushkin. I would say their only two active top four defensemen right now are Morgan Rielly, and you can make the argument for TJ Brody, but I'll say Jake McCabe because Brody's had a brutal season. So if you consider you don't trust Brody for a top four role, Lyubushkin can technically play next to Morgan Rielly. You at least need one top four defenseman going into Friday's deadline, which I think you put it as Timmins or Liljegren. There's a good shot one of them gets dealt. But we'll see. Maybe it's you want 9 NHL caliber defensemen if you're Toronto because you might have some flexibility. We'll see. Pavel Buchnevich, I will say top player will be traded. I very likely could put him unlikely, but I'm going to be optimistic and put top player will be traded because I think the limitation on options out there for top wingers and top wingers that have term, I think makes Buchnevich a very attractive option. I think if a team misses out on Jake Gensel and a team misses out on Tarasenko, and they're more of a team that, and I'll give an example here, a great example is the New York Islanders. I think especially with the Islanders having Scott Mayfield on LTIR, they have some flexibility. I could see a scenario where they go, okay, do we really want to trade assets for a rental in Tarasenko and don't even make the playoffs? And then we look like dummies going to next year. Or if you're Lou Lamoriello, maybe you trade for Pavel Buchnevich, you have team control, and you sign him to a long-term extension maybe, and there's reason why you gave up those assets. Similar to Bo Horvat, right? The Islanders signed Bo Horvat immediately to a long-term extension. It worked out for both sides. I think a similar deal could be done between St. Louis and the Islanders. And while it was a small deal, they've already made a trade this year for Robert Bertuzzo, so I could see both teams having a conversation once again. Next up, looking at, and if we go across this list, Victor Arvidsson, I will go maybe. So I think Arvidsson with the LA Kings, he used to be with the Nashville Predators. I think the Kings might trade him or Matt Roy to create some space, maybe for a top-end winger. It was rumored that Adrian Kempe might be on LTIR. That's not the case. So now we're looking at the Kings to potentially retool on the fly here while still being in the playoff race, which is very rare. You don't see that very often, but I think that could be the case for the LA Kings. All right, let's rip through some more here. Top candidates. Sean Walker. Again, is he a top player? No, but I think for argument's sake, again, I think you could put Sean Walker as a top player. Could also put him there. I think he's probably, if there was an in-between section right there, I think Sean Walker would be right there. Depth player could get a second, but I also could see him getting. So you know what? Just to even it out, we'll put him as a depth, will be traded. Again, I think he can be considered a top 4 defenseman. Same with Dumba. But I think for a contending team, like say the Tampa Bay Lightning acquire Sean Walker, he'll probably be up in the depth chart, or the Toronto Maple Leafs, he'll probably be up in the depth chart. But I would say a team like Colorado, if they were to acquire Sean Walker, he's probably on their third pair and considered depth. All right, let's keep it going. Philip Broberg, likely. I think the Edmonton Oilers are going to make a couple moves here, potentially for some forward help. And I think a lot of teams are attracted to Philip Broberg. I don't think he really fits into the top player depth because he's a younger player or prospect, but I think likely is a good, I would say, summary to put next to Broberg. Jake Gensel, top player, will be traded. I would be shocked at this point, guys. If Gensel doesn't get traded, he should be ranked number one. He should be on top of all your boards. Yeah. Jake Gensel should get traded. Kyle Dubas should be doing everything and anything he can to get all the assets he can to get Jake Gensel off the roster and maybe back on the roster in the offseason. I think that would be probably the best case scenario for Pittsburgh. If you do move Gensel, get a first round pick, get a prospect, and then do your very best to get him back in the offseason. But at the same time, maybe you only get that big haul if it's a team that Gensel's willing to re-sign with. And maybe that kind of just ends up being the result of it. Adam Henrique, depth will be traded. I think Henrique, it would be a shocker if he's not traded. I think he could be considered a top player for what he's done over his career. But at this age and being a rental, I think the only chance he'd get like a first round pick, for example, is if there's double retention and maybe somebody else attached with him. So Sam Carrick, some depth, or Frankie Vetrano could get traded. And I know he's here on my list. And I'll go maybe for Vetrano, actually, because here's my thing. The Ducks are clearly way too high on him. He's a 30-goal scorer this season. And I think when Vetrano has been seen in the past, he's seen more as a depth guy. I think the one team that would value Vetrano to be a top-line guy or a top six forward is the New York Rangers. So while Vetrano's having a 30-goal season and looking electric, I don't know if he would necessarily do what he's doing on a contending team with so much more talent and so much more competition for, I would say, puck on the stick time, right? I think Vetrano's getting a lot of that time right now with that puck on his stick, and it's given him a lot of opportunity to score. So I think Vetrano's a maybe because I think the Ducks are going to want the world for him at this point. He's got some term. He's not a rental. He's under contract past this year. So I think that gives reason for the Ducks. The same way they did with Henrique last year. This time last year, we were talking about Adam Henrique potentially being traded, but I said, let's see, because he's got a year past this year, and the Ducks might just wait till he's a rental. And now we're at the point where Henrique's a rental, and he is very likely to get traded. And I will think he will get traded. So Vetrano's that maybe. Let's rip through the last few here. D'Angelo was rumored to be on the outs, so I'll say depth will be traded. The only chance I see him getting traded is if it's 50% retained by Carolina. So last year he got traded from Philly to Carolina. He's on Carolina now, and I mean, clearly teams just don't want to deal with him because the rumor right now is 50% retained, and Carolina will take a late draft pick, like a 5th or 6th round pick. So in that case, I could see maybe a team just taking him as the 7th defenseman. That's possible. Capo Caco, I think maybe. I think he's probably close to a long shot based on Rangers people I've talked to, but he shouldn't be a long shot. He hasn't succeeded so far with the Rangers. Lafreniere was like on his last chance going into this year, I feel like, and Lafreniere's exploded. So I think Caco just hasn't done that yet. So he's a maybe for me, but based on Rangers people I've talked to, it seems like a potential long shot. Kerfoot, maybe. Mantha, likely. Nick Bukestad, maybe. Just to summarize those three players, because I think they're all similar in terms of what they could get in return and their current roles on their team. Mantha, the only difference is a pending UFA. I think it makes it more likely that he's going to get traded by Washington, but they're in the race, where Kerfoot and Bukestad now both on the Arizona Coyotes. They both have term. I think Arizona definitely wants to keep Bukestad, but people have said in around the Colorado Avalanche, including Adrian Dater, that Colorado has called on maybe reuniting Kerfoot with the Avs. So keep an eye on that. I think that could even put it at the likely column, but I'll leave it at maybe just because of the contract. Saros is here. I'm going to go long shot for Saros and long shot for John Gibson, but I really shouldn't have them next to Sid because I don't think they're anywhere close to the same scenario. So I'll put them at like the front here. move PD back, because I think those two could very well get traded in the offseason. So similar to what I said about Patrick Laine, I could totally put these two guys in the maybe column, or I could totally put Laine in the long shot column for argument's sake. And last couple guys here, Necas, I'm going to go maybe, but again, I think that's only in a bigger deal. So at the back here, and I think the only reason I'm saying that about Necas right now, because Carolina is deep into the playoff picture, is that there's now been rumors twice that Necas has been involved in trade proposals from the Hurricane side of things. So it's not like other teams are calling on Necas. Carolina, and these are like solid sources, that in the Matthew Tkachuk trade proposals and trade conversations with the Calgary Flames, and now Elias Pettersson, straight from Elliot Freeman, David Pagnotta on it too, that Necas has been in those conversations. So he is surely not happy with that with the Hurricanes right now. And last but not least, Jordan Eberle, I'll go likely. I think he's loved his role in Seattle, but being a pending UFA, it really just comes down to if the Kraken are seeing themselves as a playoff team, or if they see them as a fringe team that, you know what, they can trade their pending UFAs for assets and then just see what the team does, because they've got younger guys that are coming on the up. I could list a bunch here: Shane Wright, David Goyette, Ty Cartier. I mean, a lot of guys that are just either early to mid 20s or prospects that are going to be on the NHL scene in these upcoming years. So give those guys a shot, maybe for a playoff race, but still get assets back for your pending UFAs like an Eberle and like a Wenberg. So I think that's about it. I think there's a couple other star players that were listed down here that have been in rumors in the past, but not the case now. So to summarize, top players that I think will be traded: Jake Guentzel, Noah Hanifin, Tarasenko, Pavel Buchnevich, Jacob Markstrom. To reiterate on those two players that could get dealt in the offseason rather than before the deadline is Buchnevich and Markstrom. But I think between Guentzel, Hanifin, and Tarasenko, those are the three top players in the game that are most likely to get dealt before the deadline. Dumba, Wenberg, Sean Walker, Henrique, and D'Angelo, I think, are five that are almost, I don't want to say for sure, but almost guaranteed to get dealt. I can't see, I would say I can't see three of those five on the current teams that they are past the deadline. And then likely between Kuznetsov, Broberg, Mantha, and Eberle, I would even go as far as saying Mantha will be traded. And I'll go in terms of likely, just to spice it up a bit, I think there's a good shot Connor Timmins gets traded. I think if he's healthy by Friday, or they think he's healthy, I think there's a likely chance that Timmins or one of the Leafs depth defensemen get traded in a deal to upgrade on a D-man. So